It started like any other Sunday in Atlanta. But for me, it started in scrubs. Half wrinkle, half drenched in baby spit. With a pager that wouldn't stop buzzing and a clock that said I was already running late. I'm a hospital tech. Night shifts, emergency calls, and the kind of exhaustion that doesn't wait for weekends. That morning, I was supposed to cover an extra shift at Grady Memorial. One of the nurses called out. And they needed me. I loaded the kids into the car, still balancing my lukewarm coffee and a half-eaten banana. One was crying about cereal, the other about socks. I hadn't slept more than 3 hours, and I was already timing contractions, not from labor, but from stress. Traffic was backed up before I even made it to the freeway. My badge swung from the mirror, a silent reminder I didn't have time for this. But then, right as I tried to merge, a pristine white Tesla glided into my lane like it owned the road. Didn't honk, didn't rush, just slid in front of me like I didn't exist. And that was it. That was the spark. I gripped the wheel, gritted my teeth, and snapped. Not just at the Tesla, but at everything. I didn't plan it. My body just moved. Hand out the window, middle finger raised high, voice cracking from the scream I didn't know I was about to let out. You ain't special just 'cause you charge your car at Whole Foods. Yeah, I said it, loud enough for my kids in the back seat to go silent. Even the baby stopped fussing. The Tesla didn't react. Not a brake tap, not a window roll down, not even a honk back, just silence. That made it worse, because in that moment, I needed a fight. I needed a reason to pour out all the exhaustion, rage, loneliness building in my chest for months. I needed that Tesla to represent every missed child support check, every appointment I walked into alone, every time someone looked at my belly and assumed I was just another tired statistic. So when that silent, spotless car didn't even acknowledge me, something inside me twisted. You just go and ignore me, I yelled again, even though the windows were up and tinted. Still nothing. And that quiet, that disrespectful, infuriating quiet, it made me press the gas harder, not to run, but to win. Because I wasn't just mad, I was determined. And I had no idea what I'd just set in motion. I made 3 turns, hit every yellow light like a challenge, and every time I glanced in the mirror, that Tesla was still there, same lane, same distance, same silence. It wasn't speeding, wasn't aggressive, but it was present, in a way that felt too intentional. I turned left into a neighborhood shortcut. He turned left too. I merged onto a side road behind the school. There he was. That calm, cold presence behind me wasn't just a car anymore. It felt like judgment, like karma, like God sending me a chaperone I never asked for. My daughter in the back muttered, "Mama, that car is still behind us." I forced a laugh. Probably just headed the same way, baby. But inside, my stomach turned. Because I wasn't just being followed. I was being seen, and not the way I liked. I tapped the brakes once, just to test him. The Tesla matched perfectly. No honk, no flash. Just that same steady glide. By the time I pulled into the church lot, my heart was thudding louder than the gospel music playing on the radio. And when I saw that sleek car slide into the space behind me, I didn't just feel watched. I felt exposed. And I wasn't ready for who would step out next. I threw the car in park, palms sweaty on the steering wheel. The kids were already unbuckling, oblivious. But me, I was frozen. The Tesla door opened with that soft, futuristic whisper. No slam, no stomp, just grace. Out stepped a man, tall, steady, robed in flowing blue and gold, and my breath caught. Pastor Elijah. Of course it was. The man who prayed over me when I lost my job, who brought groceries when my fridge was empty, who stood beside me when my husband walked out and never looked back. I had flipped off my pastor. My knees almost buckled. I slammed my door shut and stepped out like I could outrun the shame. The heat from the pavement rose around me, but it couldn't compete with the burn rising in my cheeks. He didn't scold me, didn't frown, didn't smirk. He just looked at me with that calm, still gaze that always saw too much. "Good morning, Sister Shanice," he said. No sarcasm, no judgment, just that voice, kind, steady, and cutting me straight down to size. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Because how do you apologize when your whole soul just ran a red light? My lips parted, but my voice betrayed me. "Pastor, I didn't know it was you." He nodded, folding his hands in front of him, robe swaying slightly in the breeze. "Exactly," he said gently, "and that's why we need to talk." That moment, it didn't feel like judgment, it felt like a mirror, because the truth was, I'd seen that car. And in that moment of frustration, I didn't care who was behind the glass. I cared that I felt powerless. I cared that my morning was unraveling. I cared that someone dared to be calm while I was unraveling in motion. I was overwhelmed, I blurted. "The kids, the traffic, the whole morning. This pregnancy. It's a lot." He didn't blink. "You meant what you did," he said. "It wasn't an accident. You were angry, and you wanted someone to feel it. It wasn't cruel. It was just..." True. Tears stung the corners of my eyes, not from guilt, but from the exhaustion of always being on edge. Always in motion, always surviving. "I'm trying," I whispered. "I know," he said, eyes soft. "But the world doesn't need your anger. It needs your grace." That's when I realized I didn't just flip off a driver. I flipped off my own reflection. I didn't walk into church that day. I dragging my feet, dragging my guilt, dragging the weight of who I was just 10 minutes before. Inside, the organ was already humming. The ushers were placing bulletins. Kids laughed in the back pews. And me? I wanted to crawl under a pew and vanish. But Pastor Elijah walked ahead, unbothered, greeting people like nothing had happened. That made it worse. I sat near the front, some twisted need to punish myself maybe. I could feel the eyes on me, even if they weren't real. Every hymn felt heavier, every prayer louder. I kept reliving it, my hand out the window, my words like knives. And now, my pastor was preaching just feet away. I expected coldness, maybe a pointed glance, but what I got? Compassion. He didn't mention the incident, didn't even glance at me when he stepped up to preach. But the title of the sermon, Grace at 65 miles per hour. And Lord, I felt that. His voice rolled through the sanctuary like thunder made of velvet. "We're real good at looking holy in pews," he said. "But how do you drive when the road ain't smooth?" The room laughed. I cried, because I knew he wasn't just talking about traffic. He was talking about me. Pastor Elijah didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He spoke like someone who knew the road well, the spiritual one and the I-20 kind. Every word landed softer than a whisper, but it hit harder than a horn blast in traffic. He said, "The road reveals you. Not when it's smooth, but when someone cuts you off." My stomach twisted. He continued, "It's not your playlist or your bumper sticker that shows your faith. It's what you do when someone blocks your lane." That was it. He was preaching my entire Sunday, without naming names, without throwing shade, and yet, I'd never felt so seen. He quoted James 1:19. "Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." I'd been the opposite all week, all year, maybe longer. He looked out into the congregation and said, "You can't say God is my co-pilot if you won't let him touch the wheel." Someone behind me whispered, "Phew, that's a word." I didn't move, couldn't move, because in that moment, it wasn't just a sermon. It was a mirror, and in that reflection, I saw a woman stretched thin, angry at life, tired of the fight, but maybe, just maybe, ready to surrender the wheel. When the sermon ended, people rose to their feet like they always did, clapping, swaying, some with tears on their cheeks. But I just sat there, frozen in that pew, like it had become an anchor. Pastor Elijah stepped off the platform, Bible tucked under his arm. He smiled, nodded, greeted people. as if he hadn't just cracked every soul in that room wide open. My heart thudded against my ribs like it wanted out. The kids tugged at me, asking for snacks, for bathroom breaks, for everything, but I wasn't ready to leave. Not yet. I needed to do something first. I grabbed my purse with shaky hands, stood slowly, and walked toward the altar, not for prayer, not for salvation, for accountability. He turned when I reached him, no surprise on his face, just warmth, the kind of warmth that doesn't erase your mistakes, just holds space for them. "I'm sorry," I said. My voice barely made it past my throat. He didn't flinch. "I forgive you," he said. Then his eyes met mine, still and steady. "Now go forgive yourself." Those 4 words, they cracked something open inside me. Because I hadn't just wronged him, I'd forgotten the softness in myself. I stood there, blinking through tears I didn't even know were coming. His words echoed in my mind like a bell ringing through silence. Go forgive yourself. I didn't know how to do that, but I knew I wanted to try. Without thinking, I reached out and wrapped my arms around Pastor Elijah. Not a polite church hug, a full-body, shake-your-soul kind of hug. The kind you give when the weight you've been carrying finally lets go. He hugged me back, tight and firm, like a father, a brother, and a friend all at once. Then my kids, those beautiful, chaotic little humans, wrapped themselves around us too. One on each side, one around my leg. Right there, in the aisle between pews, we became a circle, not broken, not perfect, just whole. People walked by, smiling softly. No judgment, no whispers. Just quiet nods and warm eyes. One of the deacons handed me a tissue. Another rubbed my daughter's back. It was like the whole church leaned in, not to punish, but to protect. I wasn't alone, not in my anger, not in my exhaustion, not in my healing. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a problem to be fixed. I felt like a person being held. That afternoon, after church, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove. No music, no kids yelling, just me and the quiet hum of the road. I thought about what Pastor Elijah said, that grace isn't proven when you're peaceful. It's needed when you're furious. I'd spent so long thinking strength was about never breaking, holding it all in, pushing through, keeping the smile, the job, the kids, the bills, all spinning in the air like I was some kind of circus act. But maybe strength wasn't about juggling. Maybe it was about knowing when to stop, when to breathe, when to say, I'm tired, and not feel weak. I pulled into a small park, one I used to visit before life got too loud, sat on a bench with my hands resting on my belly, feeling the tiny kicks like little reminders. You're still here, you're still growing. And for the first time, I let the tears come. Not the angry ones, the real ones. The ones that say, I'm still learning, I'm still healing. I whispered, God, I don't need perfect. I just need peace. And somehow, in that moment, I felt like maybe I could have both. One day at a time. The next Sunday, I showed up early. Not for a seat, but for a vest. One of the church elders had called me midweek. Shanice, you ever think about joining the parking team? I laughed at first. Me, directing traffic. After what happened with the Tesla. But then I said yes. Not because I wanted to be seen, but because I finally wanted to serve without hiding. So there I was, belly round, vest loose, holding an orange flag in one hand and a walkie in the other. And wouldn't you know it, the first car I had to wave in was a Tesla. Not Pastor Elijah's, someone else's. I hesitated for half a second. Then I smiled, waved them in, and whispered, We're good now. There's something holy about that pavement. People think the church starts at the sanctuary, but I was learning that grace sometimes starts in the parking lot. I waved cars forward. I helped an older woman find a shady spot. I picked up a juice box someone's kid dropped. And as the sun warmed my back, I realized this was healing. Not loud, not dramatic, just faithful. It felt good to be trusted again. Even better, It felt good to trust myself. By the end of that month, I had a whole new rhythm. My kids, still wild. My mornings, still chaotic. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't waking up ready for battle. I was waking up ready to breathe. One Sunday, Pastor Elijah stopped me before service. He didn't say much, just looked at me, nodded, and said, "You're doing the work." I didn't know what to say, so I smiled and said, "Trying." But in my heart, I knew I wasn't just trying. I was transforming. That week, I ran into a woman from church at the grocery store. She pulled me aside and said, "Girl, I saw the way you were parking those cars. You were glowing." I laughed, shook my head, but then she added something that stuck. "Peace looks good on you." And that's when I realized she didn't just mean the vest or the service. She meant me. I wasn't stuck in the version of myself that flipped birds and swallowed stress anymore. I was growing, gracefully, slowly, the kind of growth you don't see in the mirror, but you feel in your bones. Because healing isn't loud, it's consistent. And now, even my roughest roads didn't feel so sharp. One evening, after the kids were finally down and the dishes were stacked like a tiny mountain in the sink, I sat on the couch with my hands in my lap. I wasn't scrolling, wasn't rushing, just sitting. And that silence, it felt different than before. Not heavy, holy. For the first time in years, I gave myself permission to reflect instead of react. I thought about that day, the Tesla, the flip-off, the shame that came crashing after. I didn't cringe. I didn't cry. I just let it be what it was. A moment, a turning point, and then I did something I never expected. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app. And I said out loud, "I forgive you, not to anyone else, to me." I forgave myself for all the harsh words I'd said when I was running on empty, for the anger I carried like armor, for the grace I gave everyone but never gave myself. It felt strange, like trying to hug your own shadow, but I meant it. Because healing doesn't start with someone else's permission. It starts when you finally stop punishing yourself. And that night, that quiet little moment on the couch, that was the real beginning. By spring, I was directing traffic in the church lot every Sunday. Bright vest, sun visor, the works. Funny, right? The woman who once flipped off her pastor now waved at every driver with a smile like she meant it. Because I did. I'd learned something. The way people drive, it's never just about the road. It's about the job they just lost, the bills they can't pay, the fight they had that morning, the silence in their passenger seat. One woman rolled down her window and yelled, "Why y'all gotta stack like this? It's hot, old me." Would have matched her tone, maybe worse. But I just smiled. Because sometimes you need to slow down to find your spot. She blinked, then smiled too. I wasn't just parking cars. I was planting seeds. Every wave, every calm word, every deep breath I took before responding, that was ministry. And I started to realize, maybe grace doesn't always look like a sermon. Sometimes it looks like a woman in a bright yellow vest, standing in the heat, choosing peace every time someone forgets theirs. And that version of me, she felt like home. 1 year later, I stood at the front of the sanctuary, not as a guest, not as someone needing prayer, but as a speaker for Women's Day. The same aisle where I once broke down in front of Pastor Elijah, I walked it now with steady feet. I wasn't perfect, but I wasn't broken either. I told them the story, the Tesla, the rage, the shame, the grace, and I watched as women nodded, hands on hearts. Some laughed, a few cried, but all of them understood, because they'd been there too. We don't lose ourselves all at once, I said. It happens in little swerves, a late night, a loud child, a dream put on hold. But the road back, it's real, and it's paved with grace we give ourselves. Afterward, Pastor Elijah hugged me tight and whispered, "You've been preaching since that Sunday." I smiled, not just with my lips, with my soul, because I finally got it. The lesson wasn't about a Tesla. It wasn't even about that finger I threw out the window. It was about the mirror I met in the moment after, and what I chose to do next. I chose grace. And now, I choose it every single mile.